Good morning, everybody. Happy Sunday. My name is 12 Gauge. Welcome to my stream. I want you to know everything that is stated here is my opinion, and it is my opinion only. This is for entertainment purposes only. This is only to discuss certain theories, factual, scientific data. This is not to discuss conspiracy. This is not to discuss speculation. This is to break down the facts that have been presented to us in the PCA or other reliable sources that we cannot dispute as being factual. I aim to just discuss factual information and learn in the process while I'm going through my own journey of understanding. Okay, without further ado, I'd like to start off by discussing criminal motive versus intent. So let's get to it. Okay. The motive for committing a crime. Intent and motive are sometimes thought of being one and the same. However, the law contains a clear distinction between the two. Intent is the mental purpose or the design to commit a specific act or a mission, whereas motive is the cause, inducement, or reason why the act is committed. So let's stop right there. A lot of times individuals think these two things are one and the same. Was their intent and the motive was the same? No. Intent, like it says, is the mental purpose or design to commit a specific act. That means that you're intending to do this. I intended to hit him in the face. My motive wasn't to hit him in the face. My intent was to hit him in the face. My motive is the cause, inducement, or reason why the act is committed. Well, I hit him in the face because for the last 3 weeks he's been making fun of me. So that was my motive. Intent is the essential element of many crimes and must be proved beyond reasonable doubt when required. Motive is seldom made an essential element required for a criminal conviction. However, motive evidence can be used by the prosecution as an aid in obtaining a conviction or to rebut a defense offered by a defendant. For example, in the 2012 case of State versus Laswell, the Arkansas Supreme Court held evidence that the defendant had expressed to a witness his desire to live the thug life. Was admissible to show the defendant's motive. Once again, the motive was the pattern that gave the intent of the crime. So here we go. To show the defendant's motive in robbing and killing the victim, and also to rebut the defendant's claim that he had no intent to rob the victim when he entered the victim's residence. So let's talk about that very quickly. The intent and the motive. His intent was to live the thug life. His motive in committing these crimes goes back to his mentality or intention of living the thug life. So I'm going to rob and I'm going to kill these individuals based on my mentality. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Let's go on to the next example that I have here. The essential elements of true crime. To obtain a conviction, the state must prove the following essential elements when charging a true crime. The act element. This is the forbidden act or failure to act. The mental element. The state of mind required for the crime. The guilty mind, usually proven by use of inferences drawn from the act of the defendant. The harm element, the wrong done, the killing, the physical injury, the property damage, loss, and so on. Note that not all crimes have a harmful result element. For example, vehicular homicide requires proof that a person was killed. By contrast, drunk driving does not require proof of any harmful result to be proven. The cause element. The harm done was natural and probable result of the wrongful act. Some crimes require proof of additional elements, such as scienter and possession, actual or constructive. Okay, so let's stop talking about that for a moment. So let's talk about intent versus motive again really quickly. We've been talking how the intention to do something is different than the motive to do something. So think about that a little bit. Think about how you want to be able to defend. Well, I didn't have any intent to hit him in the face, even though the motive led up to me wanting to hurt this individual because they wouldn't leave me alone. So let's look at the Idaho4 case, okay? Because that's what I want to talk about today. The intent of the perpetrator versus the motive. He gave a motive, Brian Koberger gave a motive where he said he liked to go driving around late at night. Or that's his alibi, my bad, not motive. His alibi was, I like to be driving around late at night. So think about that when it comes to motive and intent. So if my alibi is I like to drive around late at night, what would the motive be and what would his intention be of driving around late at night? Since we just talked about intent and motive, break that down for me. So his intention was to what? We don't know. His motive for driving around late at night, if we're not going to speculate and we're not going to have conspiracy, what we've heard is he has been noted by his neighbors as staying up late into the night. So by constructive thinking and process of elimination, driving late at night would also place him as the same as vacuuming late at night, walking around his apartment late at night, washing dishes late at night. In Pennsylvania, when he was arrested, he was sorting through trash late at night. So if our mental capacity is there, then we're able to, based on educational analysis, we're able to place that this individual enjoys late night activities. So does that state that since he's up late at night, he can't sleep? By rational mental observation, based on his mannerisms and based on his statement that he made as a younger adult, that could be part of the problem. So his intent is to stay up late, to make himself tired, to go to sleep. That is the motive. Do you get what I'm saying there? Very simplistic. Very simplistic. So, if we're talking about an individual committing a quadruple homicide, let's take Koberger out of the mix just for a minute. And by no means am I defining one way or the other where I stand, but let's take him out of the mix. And let's talk about the intent of an individual. They said it was a crime of passion. So the intent would have been to either revenge or to get even based on some kind of wrongdoing, or just to do physical harm due to the fact that you have been slighted, embarrassed, humiliated, done wrong somehow. So your motive is what? Answer that for me. Since I've told you about intent, what's your motive? You're playing detective here. You're playing um, investigator here. What's your motive? Write it down in the comment section. What's your motive? So if your intent was those things, what's your motive? I would state that your motive would be the quadruple homicide based on your emotional attachment to this intent. The emotional attachment would be anger, frustration, confusion, misunderstanding, annoyance. So the motive would be to stop feeling the intention. Because the intention would be kind of like, well, I intended to hurt them because they wouldn't shut the fuck up. Or I intended to instill my will because I got tired of their bullshit. So whenever you hear these statements, that's intent and that's motive. I hope that clears that up. Right now, I'd like to talk about the injuries sustained to a person who goes through a stabbing. This is no way discussing suicidal ideations or anything of that sort. This is merely talking about self defense or what happens whenever you cannot defend yourself against somebody yielding a weapon. This is the ppssgroup.com. It's a blog over the danger of slashing human anatomy. So on Monday morning, 18th of April, 2018, an 8-year-old boy left his home with a kitchen knife and walked into a central Minnesota elementary school. Minutes later, he slashed 3 fellow pupils, ages 8, 9, and 13 years old, all of which required surgery. This individual discussed how in his previous article he discussed more and more criminals carry knives and why more and more terrorists utilize knives to match their misguided objectives. Above, however, highlights once again that one doesn't require intense knife training to cause damage to others, and that you, as a Homeland Security professional or enforcement agent, must subsequently accept that anyone carrying a knife represents a real danger, even if he or she looks like he or she hasn't got a clue what they're actually doing. So let's put this again with the Idaho4. We're talking about all the wounds that were demonstrated on the bodies, as what the coroner stated. There were slash wounds, there were defensive wounds, there were cuts and tears, according to the family. So let's talk a little bit about how these attacks happen and what happens after they're done. Okay, so Those who understand knife combat and also know how to use a knife effectively will understand stabbing someone will not necessarily and quickly incapacitate an attacker. Combat expert and author Michael Jurek did an excellent research on the topic, and after careful analysis of forensic data, modern trauma medicine, and consulting with experts on this subject, Janek's research concluded the very same. And let's go down here. It says things that matter in a self-defiance or a self-defense situation. Good grief. In a self-defense situation, or indeed in a situation where your operation or duty requires you to incapacitate an assailant, every single second counts and can indeed make a difference between life and death. If you wound an attacker, but he still had the ability to do the same to you, you may still die. If someone is knowledgeable enough and his intention is is to incapacitate you, you really have to understand human anatomy. To hold anything in your hand, such as a weapon, a baton, self-defense tool, pepper spray, taser, or the muscles of your forearm contract and pull the flexor tendons which pass through your wrist and are attached to your fingers. If someone cuts or slashes the tendons, nerves, or muscles that power them, this connection is broken and your hand will no longer be able to close or anything or hold anything in your hand. Well, let's take this as good grief. Let's take that this is a knife, okay? And there's an individual on the other side with another knife. Well, they slash. I have my knife and I'm going like this, and they slash right here or right here. Instantly, that's going to cause my hand to open. It's going to cause my hand to open and possibly drop to my side. Because at that point, I have no connection to the tendons in my arm, meaning that there's no connection to being able to hold a weapon. There's no connection in these tendons, these muscles, to have the strength to protect myself. Okay, so let's talk about that little aspect right there. Any slashes of the tendons, the muscles, or the nerves. I know in movies sometimes you see people being shot in the arm, grazed, or even hit right here. But if you've ever taken any kind of human anatomy class, you understand that you get shot or stabbed right here. In the movies, they're still able to fight. You know, they're still able to swing and throw people around. But in reality, you get shot or stabbed, it's going to cut all these muscles, all these nerves, and everything. And it's basically going to incapacitate your arm to be able to move, to constrict, to do anything. So you're basically going to be useless of one arm because they're not connected anymore. It doesn't matter if this muscle is still connected, this muscle is not. So this muscle helps contract in order for you to move the arm. So think about that a little bit. Let's continue to go down. Go down here. Okay, it says this concept applies to muscle group, tendon, nerves, ligaments, and limbs. If someone cuts or slashes the key tissues responsible for you moving that limb, he would most likely disable or at least severely hinder your limb's function. Sometimes we refer to this as biomechanical cutting. Based on the above, your flexors, tendons, or muscles of the forearm, the biceps or triceps muscle in your upper arms, and major quadricep muscle just above the knee require reliable and effective protection from such deliberate attack or cut. So let's talk about that for a minute. You know, early on in this Idaho4 case, there was reports that one of the victims, the male victim, had extensive slashes and cuts. In his legs, it was supposedly cut so deeply that it almost went to the hamstrings. So, since what I just read, if you're able to disable those muscle groups right there and cut, then the individual is not only going to be not able to stand, they're not going to be able to run, they're not going to be able to come at you, They're not going to be able to defend themselves. So they're basically going to be just flat on their back, on their side. They're not going to be able to hold up their own weight. Just above the knee, where the muscles narrow and connect the patellar tendon, this area typically covered by a single layer of trousers material. If the comparably large target and someone close enough to reach your body, that person will clearly use the reach to quadriceps. Cutting the target is called mobility kill, and you will no longer be able to effectively defend yourself, and hence it is extremely likely you will be defeated or eliminated. The reason that I'm talking about this today is not to be gory or graphic or even to relive some of the goriness of this Idaho 4 case, but just to specify some of the anatomy that goes into us being human. I have never seen anybody, and not saying that they haven't, but I haven't seen any creator or commentator discuss any of this. They merely discuss what they see in movies, what they see in TV shows, what they see in reenactments on crime shows, or things of that nature. But in reality, an individual can be incapacitated very, very quickly. Although many will claim that this approach doesn't work, historical evidence from both sources around the world suggests very differently. Perhaps the well-known references come from the Filipino martial arts, which have a very highly evolved edge weapon culture. And that's what we heard this was an edge weapon. Their key tactic is called defanging the snake, meaning targeting and attacking limb to destroy its structure and function. According to their symbolism, the weapon is the fang and the arm wielding it is the snake. Removing the fang from the snake immediately eliminates the primary threat to the defender, the attacker's weapon. In the traditional Filipino knife arts, aiming to cut the attacker's wrist or forearm is one of the prime objectives. The goal is to sever the flexor tendon, and connect the forearm muscle to the fingers, destroying the attacker's ability to grip the weapon. Cutting the muscles on the inside of the forearm can produce the same effect. Okay, so let's go down and discuss this model right here. As you can see it has forearm, torso, abdomen, neck. So let's talk about the first one. The side of the neck and throat just about even with the arm, with the Adam's apple. Let me make this a little bigger. This area contains the carotid artery and jugular vein. If either is cut, the attacker will bleed to death very rapidly. The carotid is approximately 1.5 inches below the surface of the skin, and if severed, unconscious will result in approximately 5 to 15 seconds. So you cut that, somebody can be unconscious fairly quickly, 5 to 15 seconds. So think about that, just a slash across the neck, and you hit that artery. 5 to 15 seconds, they're going to be down. A powerful cut to the outer side of the pectoral muscle can potentially sever the cephalic vein, which will bleed profusely. A lot of times, and I showed this in another video that got taken down from YouTube, but when it comes to a stab wound, many times people think that it's just like a bullet wound or some kind of wound that every time the heart beats, it pumps out blood and splashes everywhere. No, these wounds were seen as just a knife wound and the blood was seeping out or was seeping in the body cavity and filling up the individual with blood. A powerful cut to the outer side of the pectoral muscle can potentially sever the cephalic vein, in which you will bleed profusely. That's what I just said. A powerful cut across the front of the deltoid muscle may sever the cephalic vein. A slashing cut across the biceps can disable any motion of the arm as it contains multiple veins that can cause rapid blood loss. A slashing cut across the inside of the elbow joint, in addition to the numerous veins, this area also contains the ligament that will enable motion in the forearm. A horizontal cut across the neck and the throat will not only sever your jugular vein and cause death, but it will also cut the trachea and ligament that control movement of the head. The trachea also is next to the voice box, so you will not be able to scream. A powerful slash across your pectoral muscles will destroy your ability to throw punches with any power. So you're fighting for your life, you're defending yourself against slashes, but one slash gets cut deep enough and cut your pectoral muscle. Well, there you go. You have no ability to fight anymore. A powerful vertical slash leading to the penetration of the abdominal wall result in the loss of motion and possible disembowelment. A powerful horizontal slash to the abdomen leading to the successful penetration of the abdominal wall will result in a loss of motion and possible disembowelment. A more than 1 inch penetrating slash to the inside of the forearm between the radius and the ulna bones will serve the radial artery, runs across the top of the radial bone, 2 to 4 inches behind the base of your thumb. Is severing the radial artery resulting in unconsciousness in as little as 30 seconds and death in as little as 2 minutes. So to say that this individual had not enough time to do this, it sounds like this individual, whoever did this, the brachial artery runs along the inside of your arm. The artery is deep. Severing it would result in an unconscious in as little as 15 seconds and death as little as 90 seconds. So as I was just saying, this individual that did this, they either studied these slashes and cuts, or they were very proficient with a knife. They're very proficient in being able to disrupt the individuals in which they were attacking. I mean, think about that a minute. All those examples that I gave, it didn't talk about it didn't talk about 10 minutes, it didn't talk about 12 minutes, it didn't talk about 30 minutes, 9 minutes. It didn't talk about any of that. It talked about 5 to 15 seconds. That's quick. So the individual that went in there was very precise, very knowledgeable of where to slash or stab, and how long he or she had to get through the house and do what they needed to do. I've heard, you know, um, a lot of theories, but one thing that got me thinking is, since some of the knife wounds were different, what if the individual had two knives, which would make his assault even faster? People say, well, you would need one hand to incapacitate the individual, to hold them down or whatever. Not necessarily. You're close enough to be stabbing and slashing. It don't take very much to incapacitate somebody when you're coming at them, you know? And it's very deliberate, very calculated, and very quick. As the evidence states in the PCA, there wasn't much heard. Maybe whimpering. A loud thud. It's like one of the individuals was playing with their dog. So that says that this individual made sure that they were efficient enough to keep the people from screaming, however that happened. I hope that you've enjoyed some of the information that I presented to you because, like I said, I haven't seen people break it down like this. And that's the way I like to present things, even if it sounds a little boring or a little monotonous. You know, the truth of the matter is, the more knowledgeable that you are about facts, the less you'll fall for secrecy and conspiracy because we all want that flashy, dramatized, spectacular type details. But in reality, I don't believe that any of this was spectacular. It was horrendous, it was vicious, it was evil. And I'm sure that it happened so quickly these individuals didn't even realize it was happening. And whoever was responsible for this probably was in such a high that they wouldn't have been having a lot of blood on them since, as I stated to you, if some of these wounds were all the way through the body, then the blood would have been seeping out the back, not the front. If the if they didn't penetrate the arteries where every time the heart pumped, it pumped blood out, it wouldn't have been a splashing. There would have been splash, like blood splash if there was fighting going on. But most likely there would have been more blood around the victim wherever they laid rather than toward the perpetrator. And if the perpetrator had sufficient tactical gear that allowed him not to be conflicted with blood splatter, then there wouldn't have been any DNA. There wouldn't have been any kind of loss of anything. So, for what it's worth, I hope you guys have a very awesome rest of your weekend and please enjoy.